Okay, G2D, amateur auxiliary, minimizing interference, and high-frequency operations. What is the amateur auxiliary to the FCC? This is something I had never heard of until I started teaching this, and I still have never heard of it other than this, but they say that the amateur auxiliary is amateur volunteers who are formally enlisted to monitor the airwaves for rules violations. I know the ARRL has a program of people like official observers and people like that who do a similar thing, but apparently there is also an FCC program called amateur auxiliary to do that. Now they're trying to get you to confuse you here with the voluntary examiners also, so be careful that you don't fall into the little trap there. Which of the following are the objectives of the amateur auxiliary? It's to encourage amateur self-regulation and compliance with the rules. And once again, they're trying to get you to fall into the VE trap or the frequency coordinator trap. What skills learned during hidden transmitter hunts are of help to the amateur auxiliary? A hidden transmitter hunt is kind of a fun thing. Clubs do them occasionally, or some quite frequently actually, where somebody will go out and hide a transmitter, and then the first person to find it wins the contest, wins the hunt. And the skill is direction finding, to be able to find this hidden transmitter. And they do all kinds of sneaky things. They'll hide them in a culvert so that the signal will come out of both ends of the culvert but nowhere else, and cute little things like that. Or another good one is to put one beside a barbed wire fence and the signal radiates all up and down the fence line. Which of the following describes an azimuthal projection map? And what it is, it's a world map projection centered on a particular location. And this is another thing that I thought I had uploaded for you, not because you really need it for the test, but because it's a really neat operating aid. And you can go on, if you put azimuthal projection map into Google, you'll find several sites that will let you develop one. You just put in your latitude and longitude, and I have it here for Big Island. And it shows you the direction from your location to all of these other places on the Earth. Okay, and then out here on the outer ring are the headings to turn your beam. Now, this is in true headings, so if you're trying to do it using a magnetic compass, be sure you allow for the magnetic variation. But what this, and there are some lines through here that every 30 degrees they have a line here that goes out to the edge. But here you are with a map that is centered on your location. I always wanted to be the center of the universe, and here I am. That lets you know what direction to turn your antenna to talk to any particular place. When is it permissible to communicate with amateur stations in countries outside the areas administered by the Federal Communication Commission? When the contact is with amateurs in any country except those whose administrations have notified the ITU that they object to such communications. So what this is saying is it's permissible to have communications with amateurs in any country except those whose administrations have notified that they object. And if you go to the ARRL website, you will find that there are some, and but they probably won't have amateurs on the air anyway. So, but if you do hear somebody on and try to answer him and he doesn't talk to you, that might be something for you to check. Would be to see if they're one of the countries that have objected to the ITU. I don't think there are very many. I don't think there are more than 8 or 12 who have objected to that. How is a directional antenna pointed when making a long path contact with another station? You'll remember last week we talked about what happens if you are hearing a station through both the long path and the short path. You'll have an echo from For the long path, you're going to turn your antenna 180 degrees from the short path. You may actually find that the signal is stronger on the short path than it is on the long path, depending on whatever propagation stuff is going on. Which of the following is required by the FCC rules when operating in the 60-meter band? The 60-meter band has a power limitation of, it's now increased to 100 watts of effective radiated power. That's different than the power limits on any of the other bands. And what that means is if you're using an antenna that has gain, you have to allow for the gain of the antenna in evaluating your power. If you have a dipole antenna, that's the reference antenna for your gain antenna. So if you're using a dipole and putting the 100 watts into it, then no problem. But if you're using an antenna that has different gain characteristics than a dipole, then you have to keep a record of the gain so that you won't exceed the 100-watt effective radiated power limit. Why do many amateurs keep a log even though the FCC doesn't require it? And when I got started in ham radio, and any of you who've been around for a while know that at one time we had to log everything. Even mobile operation, you had to keep a log, and they had a little handy small logbook that you could keep in the car for mobile operation. That was the first one they eliminated, probably as a safety measure. But now logging is not required for most purposes. Now, I train emergency communicators, and when we get into emergency communication, then logs are important again because they document what the emergency is and what kind of communications went on. But in general, we are not required to log our amateur contacts. It's a good idea, though, for a couple reasons. The one for the test is to help with a reply if the FCC requests information about who you were talking to on a particular day, what power you were running, or perhaps who was operating your station. Because if you allow other people to operate your station using your call sign, then you want to be sure and have that in your log with the date and the time they were doing it. So that's a reason to do it. Again, contests, if you're operating in a contest, you have to log that because that's how the information goes to the people who adjudicate the contest to award the points for it and determine who's the winner and so on. So you'll be logging there. But and a log is just kind of a neat thing. You can go back and with the computer-based logs right now, you can type in a call sign of someone you think you may have talked to 10 years ago, and it'll come up and show you when it was and what frequency and all that sort of thing. But it's just kind of nice to browse through your logs sometimes and see who you've talked to and where you've talked and all that sort of thing. But the official answer for the test is to help with a reply if the FCC requests information. What information is traditionally contained in a station log? Date and time of the contact. Be sure to indicate whether you're using coordinated universal time or local time. For most logs on the high-frequency band, you'll use coordinated universal time because you'll be talking to people outside of your time zone. The band or the frequency, the call sign of the station contacted, and the signal report given. All of these choices are correct. What is QRP operation? You'll remember we talked about what QRP means when we talked about the Q signals. It means low power transmit operation. Which HF antenna, which high frequency antenna, would be best for use for minimizing interference? You're going to want to use a unidirectional antenna, an antenna that is most sensitive from a single direction. And that way it will minimize the interference from all other directions. All of these other antennas will receive interference from all directions. But the unidirectional antenna will reduce the amount of interference it receives from other directions besides the forward direction of the antenna.